Alright, so move on to the next segment. I'll be sharing my fight prediction for this weekend's fight taking place in the UFC between Dricus Du Plessis and Sean Strickland. So, in the main event of UFC 312, Dricus Du Plessis will be defending his middleweight title against Sean Strickland in a highly anticipated rematch taking place at the middleweight division. So these are the following storylines that I have heading into this highly anticipated rematch for the middleweight championship. Can Dricus Du Plessis continue his reign at the middleweight division? Now, Dricus Du Plessis, he's done the dirty work in the past, climbing up the rankings to be in the position that he's at this middleweight division. He's climbed up in the rankings, and in the last 3 fights is the reason why he is the king, the reigning defending middleweight champion at this division. And he picked up a KO, starting off with a KO victory that he had against Robert Whittaker in 2023 that shocked the middleweight division. Then, in the beginning part of 2024, last year around this time, he defeated Sean Strickland by split decision to become the new middleweight champion. And then, summer of 2024, he defeated Israel Adesanya by submission. So his last 3 fights his resume is starting to age like fine wine because he's defeated the top tier guys at this middleweight division at least once. So we're going to see if Dricus Du Plessis can bring that momentum into the main event of UFC 312, and we're going to see if he can still reign supreme by possibly knocking off Sean Strickland again in the main event of UFC 312. So last storyline is, can Sean Strickland make the adjustments in this highly anticipated rematch? Now, the first fight, it's respectable, whatever you guys have watching and listening, who won the first fight. The score of all 3 judges were 48, I think all 3. If I'm wrong about, I think all 3 were 48-47. If I'm wrong about that, I apologize. But the scores stood of a split decision victory of Dricus Du Plessis winning that fight the first time. And it's controversial of who you guys really believe won that fight, because it could have won either way. And it's respectable to think if you think Sean Strickland won the first fight. So, first fight was very close. This time, we're going to see if he can make the small adjustments. I'll get into that in the game plan. Don't want to give that away too quickly. But it's going to be interesting because he's going to have Alex Pereira, the reigning defending light heavyweight champion, in his corner for this fight against Dricus Du Plessis in the main event of UFC 312. So we're going to see if Alex Pereira training with Sean Strickland has made a difference for this fight, for this rematch. We're going to see if Sean Strickland can touch up on these small adjustments that the small mistakes that he had heading into this highly anticipated rematch. So, the tail of the tape here, starting off with the challenger, Sean Strickland. Sean Strickland has 29 victories, 6 losses to his resume. He has 11 victories come away of knockout, 4 submission victories, stands at 6'1", and has a reach of 76 inches, and currently is the #1 ranked contender at the middleweight division. Then the champion, Dricus Du Plessis. Dricus Du Plessis has 22 victories, 2 losses, 9 victories come away of knockout, 11 submission victories. Currently the reigning defending middleweight champion, stands at 6'1" and has a reach advantage of 76 inches. So the height and the reach are actually at the same. Both are 6'1". Both have a reach of 76 inches, and you can see there was no room for error when the 2 respective fighters fought each other the first time in the height and the reach. So we're gonna see how that plays out in this rematch. But these are the game plans that I have for these respective fighters to follow. Starting off with Sean Strickland. I think Sean Strickland is gonna have to land the significant strikes. Now, in the first fight between himself and DDP, Sean Strickland landed a total of 42% of his significant strikes in the first fight against DDP. And he moved around well. I think Sean Strickland moved around well with his footwork and feinting in DDP to make mistakes, which set up the door and opened the door, I should say, for him to land a significant strikes on DDP. So definitely that's going to be something that's going to be important for Sean Strickland to follow in this rematch. Next, I think he's going to have to be alert defensively. Now, yes, I get the criticism that Sean Strickland gets, where a lot of people think that he can be a boring fighter and sometimes he doesn't take risk, or he just does enough to get the victory sometimes. Yeah, there's truth to that, but a lot of people forget how great a defensive fighter that Sean Strickland really is. I think that gets a lot overlooked when Sean Strickland gets the criticism, or how you evaluate him as a MMA fighter. And I've noticed how good Sean Strickland has been over the years defensively, and going back and watching the tape preparing for this fight prediction for you guys, that he actually is a pretty good defensive fighter. And he's got to be alert in this rematch, being alert defensively. Take the time. He's got to take his time the shots perfectly, and win the counter-punching battle against DDP. And last but not least, Sean Strickland's got to stuff the takedowns. Now, honestly, this goes back to my point of how close the fight was, the scorecards being 48-47. I believe the cut that Sean Strickland suffered, whether he was on the right or left eye, that he was gushing down blood for the duration of the fight in the second half of the fight, that and the fact that DDP landed 6 takedowns and having 2 minutes of ground control, those 3 reasons of the cut eye, the 6 takedowns that DDP landed, and the 2 minutes of ground control is the reason why 2 out of 3 judges believe that Sean Strickland lost that fight. So if Sean Strickland, knowing that DDP is a really good grappler, really good wrestler, has that background of 11 submission victories, you know he's going to go for the takedowns like he did in the first fight, stuff the takedowns, and make DDP beat you standing up. If he follows those 3 things, we might have a new middleweight champion in the UFC after UFC 312. Now for the champion, Dricus Du Plessis, I think DDP is going to have to land the takedowns and take the fight to the ground. Now, this goes to my point that I just said. DDP landed 6 takedowns against Sean Strickland in the first fight. And I think it should go back to that game plan, land more takedowns, and this time gain more ground control. He had 2 minutes. 2 minutes that could be a good amount of time to wow the judges like he did in the first fight. But I think this time he should keep Sean Strickland grounded, frustrate him on the ground, tap into that wrestling background, and possibly go for some submission attempts and possibly land a submission victory. So I think the game plan should be very simple here. Land the takedowns, take Sean Strickland down to the ground, tap into that wrestling background. Now next, I think DDP is going to have to land that overhand right. Now, if you guys watch DDP, he has that awkward style to him that I've never seen duplicated in the octagon. Like, the overhand right hand that he has, I wish I could play the clips for you guys, but I don't want to get in trouble for copyright. But DDP, when he steps in, he ducks his head down and then just throws a wild right hand. But 9 times out of 10, it works because of how awkward the style is. So I think that's one of his best punches of his arsenal. And I like the way how he steps into the punch, like I just displayed. He steps into the punch, plants the foot down, and swings. While he's swinging, he has his head down, and that hurt Sean Strickland at times in the first fight. And I think that could hurt Sean Strickland at times when DDP is finding success landing the significant strikes, and also the spinning back fist that DDP has as well. I think that's very underrated and a good arsenal that he has in his toolbox as well. Those 2 things I think he should do to Sean Strickland as the fight goes on standing. And last but not least, I think this goes back to the awkward stance of how DDP fights. I think he should switch stances in the octagon. DDP has shown he can fight pretty comfortably in the orthodox stance or the southpaw stance pretty well. And he's found a lot of success doing that, switching stances, going back and forth of the orthodox or southpaw, landing the significant strikes on Sean Strickland in the first fight. And that led to Sean Strickland getting cut open, whether it was the right or left eye, with that blood gushing down. And that opened the door for Sean Strickland at times to make mistakes. I think if DDP could do those 3 things, he's going to walk out still middleweight champion for the main event of UFC 312. But with that being said, I'm going to go with Dricus Du Plessis to successfully retain his middleweight title against Sean Strickland by decision in the main event of UFC 312. Now, I think this fight is going to be very similar to the first fight. Very close, very highly anticipated, and a very calculated chess match between DDP and Sean Strickland. And I think this could come down to another split decision victory for DDP. But the awkwardness of DDP that he displays in the octagon, and him being able to switch comfortably to an orthodox or southpaw stance, I think that's going to be one of the reasons why he defeats Sean Strickland. He showed in the first fight he is very comfortable switching stances, fighting either in the orthodox or southpaw, landing strikes. And that awkward overhand right hand, he plants the foot down, steps in and ducks down while he's throwing the punch. I think that's going to be another reason why he defeats Sean Strickland, because the awkwardness of it, even though it's awkward, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I think this could be one of the reasons why he defeats Sean Strickland, landing that significant overhand right hand as well. And I think DDP is going to tap into that wrestling background that he has. He has 11 submission victories 11 victories come away of submission. So he landed 6 takedowns against Sean Strickland in the first fight. I think he's going to go back to that. This time, try to land more takedowns. This time, have more ground control. He had 2 minutes of ground control in the first fight. And I think he wants to get back to that and make Sean Strickland frustrated on the ground and possibly set up for submission stoppage. But I'm going to go with DDP here to win the fight by split decision once again in this highly anticipated rematch to successfully retain his retain his middleweight title at UFC 312. But that is my fight prediction between Dricus Du Plessis and Sean Strickland.